everybody. Welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOP-LP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9 and on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube station at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and today I'm very pleased to welcome the chair of the Energy Advisory Committee, Michael Strauss, and the committee member and chair of the Building Subcommittee, Bill Clary, are both here. So, first of all, thanks to both of you. I appreciate your coming to the morning show to teach us about the Energy Advisory Committee.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mary.
It's my pleasure. Just a little background. Mike Strauss is a materials scientist who does consulting and training in that area. And Bill Clary is chair of the Building Subcommittee, as I mentioned. He got a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Minnesota, and he's currently the president and CEO of Pacific Agritech. And he's been involved in corporate management and community board since 1992. That's a good run, Bill.
Thank you.
And he's lived in Newburyport since 2016, and Mike has lived in Newburyport since, do I remember correctly, 1992?
Yes.
Mike? Okay. So anyway, let's start out at the beginning. Could you please tell us about the Energy Advisory Committee? What's your mission, and why is it important?
Well, the advisory committee was actually, our charter is to advise the mayor and city council on energy matters. So in some sense, we don't make the decisions. We help out the town to make better decisions regarding energy. And that's our job. And it's directed towards the mayor and city council, but also for the residents as well. So we run programs to help residents. And our overriding goal these days is to get the city to net zero energy, because the city has made a number of commitments to doing that over the years, over a number of mayors, a number of city councils.
It's probably a good point to segue off that is 2017, there was the master plan that the city put together, which I don't think is really well known in the community that plan exists. It was a community effort where people were brought together to create the plan. But even though it's a public document, it's not well known. It is on the city website, I believe. And then there have been subsequent commitments. Mayor Holliday attended a C40 meeting.
Yes.
And so while it's not codified or fully adopted by the council, the city has been trying to see what it can do to reduce its energy consumption and move to net zero.
So the document is there, and people can look it up and make it less secret.
Right, right. It was never intended to be secret.
Yeah, clearly. And what is C40?
It's 40 cities that globally that came together to, and so Paris was one of those cities.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe New York adopted it. Singapore, I believe. There was a lot of coastal cities where rising sea levels was and is a major issue that they're trying to deal with.
So it has an international pedigree.
Right.
Including Paris. All right. And of course, we are certainly a coastal city, so it's all the more important to pay attention and read the document. Well, tell us a little bit about how the advisory committee functions. For example, how do people become members? And what got each of you interested in becoming part of the committee?
Well, the structure of the committee is there are 12 members. One of them is the city energy and sustainability manager, Molly Ettenborough.
Okay.
The rest of us have gotten on it because of our interest. And the way it works is you get appointed by the mayor, but it's not a difficult process of you have to be in the know. If you contact us, and we are looking for members, I'll talk to you, or various members will talk to you, and we'll say, hey, give me a short bio. I'll send this off to the mayor. The mayor may want to chat with you a little bit, and then it says, hey, I'd like you to be on the committee. And that's how one gets on the committee. And that's basically how all of us got on. I don't know, was that pretty much describe the process?
Yeah, I would say that's the process, but it's a hugely diverse group of people. I mean, there's everything from engineers, PhDs in material science, people that worked in the electricity industry, whether it was transmission or power generation. And then there's people who have marketing backgrounds of various kinds. We had a consultant in energy policy who's still on it.
Yeah, an economist.
That economist, that's right. So it's not limited to any specific background because all the perspectives are useful when trying to figure out how to advise the city.
Oh, I'm sure that's a lot of different kind of lenses through which to view the challenges in front of the committee and in front of the committee to get to net zero.
Yeah, in fact, I think one of the things we're starting to realize is while we certainly have some technical chops to evaluate things, one of the bigger issues is communications. And so those humanities, people with humanities backgrounds and experiences are increasingly important in terms of how we're going to get the word out.
In today's vocabulary, you need influencers and messengers. Yeah, that's right. There you go. So, all right. And just what personally got each of you interested in the committee, in your training or your background or your concern about climate change?
So yeah, as an engineer, I'd been working in the energy field in bioenergy, so converting trees into ethanol, so you could drive your car with a tree. I'd worked in that, and I'd worked in some other energy efficiency fields. And I'm guessing this is probably around 2005, a group started in Newburyport called SEED, which was, I forget what the
An acronym for something.
It was the acronym for something energy related. One of those E's probably had energy, and it was a group of concerned citizens. And then Mayor John Moak started an energy committee, which had 3 people, and that was Bob Miller, Cliff Gowdy, and Jeff Wooten. And he wanted to get solar on the middle school and the DPS, and that core group got that done. And at that time, it was the largest solar project in the state of Massachusetts. So it was 500 kilowatts. And from that, that was more of an informal group, and that got expanded with an actual charter to 12 members, and that's where it started.
Okay, so that's, as they say in the Marvel world, the origin story.
Yeah. So
And that's impressive that they were they got the solar going and had the largest at the time, I assume. So,
I think it was the largest in the state, actually, wasn't it, when it first went in?
yes, it was the largest in the state.
Well,
And
that's
it's been
impressive.
operating ever since, so it's been 15 plus years,
Yeah.
right?
Well, Newburyport was a pioneer. Good for Newburyport. Well, can you give us some examples of some of the projects the committee has worked on since you were there or is working on, and the impacts that you've seen? Obviously, that solar panel, I mean, that was prior a more informal kind of group of people, but that's an impressive outcome. What are some of the projects that you have recently worked on or are working on now, and the impacts that you're seeing or that you hope for?
Well, so I'd say the most recent one, and it has had a large impact on the residents of Newburyport, is electricity aggregation. It's called community choice aggregation. What I think was back in 1997 or 98, the state deregulated the energy industry. So the utilities no longer generate power. They own the wires, and they maintain them, and they buy energy. So they sold off all the energy production assets, and they buy energy. And there's an open market. And you, too, are allowed to buy energy. So you've probably gotten emails and cards in the mail that say, oh, get a $50 gift card, sign up for our energy, it's really cheap. And then what happens is they jack up the prices. And the Attorney General did a study that those retail offers have cost residents several $100 million a year over utility. Cities can also so that's sort of retail. At a wholesale level, the city can decide to take all their residents and put them into one buying group and go out and buy energy. And when you do that, you use a different sort of contracting that gets you out of that jacking up the price. You have firm fixed price contracts. And we had looked into this, and we recommended it to the mayor and city council, and we got it passed through city council right at the beginning of the pandemic. And you'll notice then the retail prices then shot up.
Yeah.
And so we got the city council and the mayor to pull the trigger and start it, not just pass it, when the prices shot up, and we were able to get better pricing. And in 2023, this year, in the first 6 months of this year, by doing that, this program saved the residents $1.7 million, or roughly $300 per household. And that savings is continuing on. So that's a big something to help the city's residents.
Yeah, I mean, a good example is the renewal rate as of November 1st is 14 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Whereas National Grid is 18.
Yeah.
So it's a 4-cent saving. Now, that's only the energy. The transmission and distribution charges from National Grid are still whatever they're going to be from National Grid based on their rate work with the state. But the energy costs we can control, and successfully so far.
Yeah.
Well, let me say personally, thank you. Because this was, I think, when they jacked up the prices, it was shocking how much they were going to charge, and it was such a relief. Let's give you credit. I didn't know.
And I don't want to make it sound like the utilities are bad guys. They are.
I understand.
The reason this all works is because the utilities are forced by regulation on how they can purchase power. So they have very strict rules, and they buy it twice a year on specific days, and they average it over the year. Where we can go in and say, oh, prices are going down, maybe we should lock in another year because prices are good now. They can't do that. We can.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're bad guys. I don't want to be bad-mouthing them.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Mike. I appreciate that, but still, thank you, because that's a huge savings.
Yeah.
And I certainly saw it in my bills. And you know what you're talking about is, so to speak, inside energy baseball, to coin a phrase. And of course, the average consumer doesn't understand about everything, how the industry works, the way you just described, that National Grid purchases energy from other suppliers, and then they funnel it to you. And so it's good for us all to understand more, and thank you for explaining that about how this happens. But it was quite a revelation that a city like Newburyport could become an aggregate customer and then look for the best possible. You could shop for your electricity, which is something most of us, I think, speaking personally, had no awareness of. Around the time that was happening, we had Mass Save come to do an audit of our house. And the guy who came showed us a list. There was a website of all the different people that you could buy energy from, and it was like a big light bulb. Oh, an appropriate metaphor. LED going off over my head. Wow, I never knew you could shop for electricity, and that the city shopped on my behalf. I really appreciate, and I know the city continues to shop on our behalf. And thank you, Energy Advisory Committee.
Well, in addition to for the residences, the city has also been doing that for itself.
Yes.
For its own municipal operations. And while there are several people on the committee that would love to be more green, less carbon intensive, one of the driving metrics for what we're doing is cost.
Of course.
And so what the city's done is they've sourced electricity from various solar farms and other locations to both reduce its carbon footprint, but also to get reduced costs, and has aggregated its power purchasing for quite a few years now.
I think it's been 4 or 6 years, something like that.
Which saves the city budget $100,000+ a year, I believe. So it's a fairly significant budget saving that the city's embarked on that was kind of a precursor to doing it for the residents.
Yeah, which is also wonderful, and thank you very much. A few years ago, I don't remember what year it was, but I remember getting notification from, but it was when Mayor Holliday was in office, so it was a few years ago, about the solar farms that the city was buying into. And so I thought, well, if it's good enough for the city of Newburyport, it's good enough for me. I think it's Nexamp is the one that I bought into. And I tell you, one of the nice things about buying into it is I feel virtuous, but also because I pay for the shares through Nexamp, when I get my electricity bill from National Grid, it usually says 0. And I can't tell you what a joy that is. And so thank you for that little joy.
Well, one of the things we're trying to do, very similar to that, notice you get 2 bills.
Yes.
You get,
Yeah.
and so that can be confusing to some people. And one of the things, this came out of the Newburyport Energy Committee that we are trying to pass through at the state level, is to notice you had to do that retail. You had to sign up for that.
I did, yeah.
Now that we are an aggregated community, we would like to do that wholesale. We'd like to say
interesting.
the aggregation, we could buy everything that solar farm takes. And we could put it in there and spread that discount over all of our residents. And that's hung up right now at the state level, getting it passed. It's kind of frustrating because it hits all the buttons that the state is trying to do to get solar adopted. It lowers the soft costs, the marketing of having to market to you and to me and to Bill. You just market to the whole aggregation. You can target it towards low-income residents, which is something they're hoping to get the solar benefit to. So it hits a lot of buttons, but it's hit some regulatory snags, and we're
Okay.
trying to get it in there so that we can pass those sorts of savings on to everybody.
Well, and thank you for dealing with the regulatory, the bureaucratic kind of rabbit holes, so to speak. I appreciate, because no one wants to do that, and so it's good for you. Thank you very much for doing that. But to sum up what you just said, not only can you shop retail for electricity, you can shop wholesale too, and target the markets to which you want to direct those savings. So that's really, really important work.
We've been looking at also natural gas supply to see if that's another
Interesting.
area to get an aggregated rate on the natural gas supply as another thing. And then the third thing is that about a third of the homes in Newburyport use oil for their heating system.
Yeah.
And we've been working with some of the oil heat suppliers, which are increasingly adding biofuels into the heating blend, which is good from a carbon standpoint, but it requires that the furnaces be upgraded or updated with the burner nozzles getting cleaned out and various other, maintenance items. So there's a number of different things we're trying to do, as well as make people aware, as you mentioned, mass save.
Yeah.
There's fairly large incentives if you take your oil system and convert it to heat pumps, for instance.
Electric.
Electric
Yeah.
heat pumps. So we're trying to both, on one hand, save people money on where they're buying their energy, but also make sure they're aware of the programs that are on the state and federal government level to subsidize updates and improvements to their houses.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
I think you mentioned having the mass save energy audit, and that's very important. And I think one of the snags we see in moving, particularly buildings, most people don't think about their furnaces and water heaters until they stop working.
This is true.
And when that happens, they have to replace it
Yeah.
immediately.
Yes.
And so you don't have time to think, oh, should I move to a heat pump system? Should I move to a more efficient system? Should I get my burner upgraded so that I can use a biofuel? And so it's really good to plan in advance, and those energy audits help with that. And it's good to have a plan and know what you can do. So you go, this is what I'm going to need to do if I want to move to heat pumps, or this is what I need to do if I'm going to change something.
And yeah, that's, you're so right, that phenomenon that, the water heater, my basement is flooded. And then you're not going to do some research.
And you go, I need it today. And the first plumber who picks up,
That's right.
they've got the business,
Absolutely,
and
that's
whatever they're putting.
Been there.
And we've all been there. And you want to have that plan in place so that when that happens, you do it. Because it's also, when you need it is also the most efficient time in some sense to get it done. So if
Yeah.
you're doing a rehab, that's a good time
Yeah.
to do it. Because if you've had a new water tank or a new furnace put in, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, you don't want to go, oh, I'll just swap it out this
Right,
year, because
yeah.
you've lost that investment.
Right.
So when it's time, and the numbers are pretty simple. Newburyport has about 8,000 households. A furnace lasts around 20 years. So that means that there are roughly 400 furnaces swapped out every year.
Okay.
And so those are the, if your home is at the point where its furnace is starting to be, it's time to be looking around, you want to look around and not wait until it's that February day where it's really cold
There's a
and,
polar vortex coming.
Right.
and your house is freezing. You want to get it done before that.
Yeah. And also, the other reason I think it's good to plan ahead, Mike, is that there are so many more products on the market now.
Yes.
Like heat pumps. People, that phrase has kind of crept into our vocabulary in the last couple of years. And yet, speaking personally, I understand sort of how they work, but if I had to buy one, because the polar vortex were coming and my furnace was 21 years old, it would be hard for me to do the requisite research.
Yeah.
So being prepared to kind of understand some of the new vocabulary and what the products are. There's so many products now that to avoid being overwhelmed.
Yeah, Mass
it's
Save
good
does. That's a really good point, Mary. Mass Save has a nice website where that they update pretty regularly, and they both have some products, but more importantly, contractors that are
Yeah.
pre-qualified by Mass Save,
Yeah.
where you put in your zip code and it'll give you a list of, okay, these are the people that are knowledgeable about heat pumps, and you can contact them to get bids or quotes or.
Yeah.
It's a good service.
And another good place to start is we have a website called Energize Newburyport.
I was just going to ask you about that.
So if you just type in Energize Newburyport, you'll get to the page. You can sign up or you can be an anonymous user. And it has a lot of information on a lot of actions you can take to to reduce your carbon footprint. And it has some things like what are some basics of heat pumps. And where you can get more information and links to Mass Save. So that's a really good local source, Energize Newburyport.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it's a terrific website, may I just say, and it has so much information on it, but it's very well organized. And so you won't be overwhelmed. There's different categories you can check. It's just very well planned out. And it looks like it's, because I know, I'm going to go ahead and give people the URL. So it's community.massenergize.org/Newburyport. I'll repeat that, community.massenergize.org/Newburyport. So it looks as though it's different cities can kind of join in, that it's a Massachusetts state kind of endeavor. Am I correct about that?
So it was actually started by some volunteers in Wayland. They had some, they were interested in energy, they also had some computer savvy, and they said, we don't see any products out there. We want a website to share information, we don't see one. So they built one for Wayland.
Okay.
And because they were clever and smart, they designed it so that other towns could join in. And so now they have this Mass Energize site, and we're one of the towns that have joined it.
Yeah.
And the good thing and the bad thing about that is that, what they did is they've got a template in terms of how you lay things out. So you can get up and running fairly quickly as long as you work within the template.
Okay. But if you wander
We had to
outside,
wrestle through that a little bit. We had some other ideas,
Okay.
but at the end of the day, we kind of got funneled in on what the structure of the template was. And I think to your point, it winds up with a not overwhelming,
Yeah.
fairly well organized site for people to use.
you had to color inside the lines.
We did.
But what I want to say about because it's an interactive website, and I say that one of the things I emerged from the website was this, by gosh and by golly, I'm doing well. Because there are a lot of different things you can check out. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? You might think about this. And a lot of them, well, just a solar farm.
Right.
Which got,
Yeah.
so I wound up feeling proud.
There you go.
Not that there weren't other things I could still do, but I was already doing a good number of them. And so there's something to be said for that flush feeling of, yeah, I'm on the side of
Right.
having a future.
One of the things I should point out about heat pumps, which is sort of, so the general plan, if I were to summarize Newburyport's net zero energy plan
Yeah.
in a sentence, it's go electric, green up the grid. And go electric is our responsibility as a community. Green up the grid is really at the state, regional, federal level. And that means heat pump. It doesn't have to be completely. If you can get biofuel to do it, that's another solution. But the general thought is go electric. And one of the issues with heat pumps is well, it's both a blessing and it can be a problem, is with heat pumps, you can also get air conditioning sort of for free on it because it works both ways. So you don't have to have a separate central air conditioning system. But also, it can be a little tricky hooking into your distribution system, particularly in a place like Newburyport that has a lot of older homes.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
because we have older homes, you need to plan a little better to figure out what you can do with what
Yeah.
you've got. And that's why we've got Bill dealing with buildings, because it's a big problem. And that's why
It
we
is.
need a whole group to help people with the problems of older homes.
Yeah, and we mean like super old homes in Newburyport.
We have a
Back
lot
to the
of them.
1600s. So what are some of the challenges then, Bill, that you run into when we were looking for houses in Newburyport? We had a phrase for the houses that were super old. We called them the houses with scary basements.
Right,
The scary basement houses.
Well, I mean, part of the character of Newburyport and a lot of the North Shore towns is their older homes
Yeah.
from the 1600s through the 1800s.
Yeah.
And the cities in general would like to preserve the character of those houses. So one of the ways to upgrade the heating system in a house would be to have what's called all these little mini split heat pumps.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And they're very easy to install, but you wind up having these tubes or pipes going up the sides of the
Yes.
house, which may or may not be enclosed, which could ruin the aesthetics of the house, depending on how they're run or hidden or whatever. And then you're perforating walls, which creates potential leaks or other things. So retrofitting an older home that has some sort of maybe oil heat with steam radiators, there's not an easy way. Heat pumps do not generate steam. They don't get hot enough to create steam, so you can just continue using the steam radiators. So the question is, how do you retrofit that whole process? And of course you can. Anything can be solved with enough money. But in most cases, most homers kind of balk when they find out how much money that is.
Yeah.
So we've been working with the state and some of the suppliers of heat pumps to try to figure out, is there a way to do it? And so one of the things that's emerging is like those mini splits are fairly small, and they take energy out of the air and then make heat that's blown inside, or the opposite way in the summer, make it cold. If you could take the heat and make it into a liquid, so you're passing a hot fluid through, instead of a steam radiator, maybe so you have forced hot water like system.
Okay, yeah.
That might be a way to preserve the existing pipes in the home, convert them from a steam to a hot water system. You'd probably have to change the actual radiators, but you could keep the basic system in place and do a whole home heat pump system. So, but those systems are not very well known and marketed, and there's been a lot of shakeups in the market with the suppliers. For instance, I believe Trane bought Arctic, and then Mitsubishi just bought Trane, and they're
Okay.
now integrating all their products. So there's a lot of confusion with the
Yeah.
distributors and the products. So the technologies are coming along, but it's there's some things are better established than others, and for older homes, it's still a process.
Yeah. It's,
And the incentives, while significant, may not be. Mike had a case in point. I think we did an article about that, where to put heat pumps in Mike's house was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, wow.
So there are incentives for I don't want to scare people, there are incentives for the heat pumps. They can be very cost effective. But depending on how you have to, what sort of surgery you're going to have to do in your house
Yeah.
to preserve what we like here, we need some better solutions. And we're trying to work with companies to get them.
So we've been working with the Historical Commission. We have a member on the EAC. We've also worked with New England Historic Homes.
Yeah, Historic New England.
Historic New England, to try to get, and one of the things that they will tell you, Historic New England in particular, has done a lot of work, and one of the first things they do is kind of what you did, Mary, is get a hold of Mass Save.
Yeah.
And start looking, how do you reduce the air leaks into your house so you don't have cold air blowing in, making your house cold? What can you do about your windows to improve their operation, whether it's just putting gasketing material or restoring them, or in some cases replacing them? Doorways are a big issue. Old doors sometimes need some help. Again, you know, replacing those air leaks. So how can you tighten your home so it's more energy efficient without going all the way into tearing out all the walls and up?
And I think that that's a good point in general. The more you can do before you make a transition, get a new furnace, whether you get a new furnace or go to heat pumps or something else, the more you can do to make your home more efficient, that means the smaller the furnace you're going to need.
Yeah, right.
And that means that will be less expensive, more cost efficient. So doing conservation efforts, insulating, crack sealing, better doors and windows, all those things, and there are a lot of incentives.
Ceiling insulation way up in the attics.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a huge issue.
Yeah.
We've been in touch with some local architects on that, and they seem fairly knowledgeable about retrofitting older homes. And in addition to the problems with knob and tube wiring and being careful with that in terms of blowing in insulation, which you're not supposed to do, making sure you don't do something that causes vapor from the house, like when you're cooking or taking a shower, you want to make sure that that moisture leaves the house properly and doesn't create a wet surface where mold, mildew, or rot sets in. And so you really have to be cognizant with an older home in terms of how you do these things.
So older homes often require special care, but there's almost always something you can do to make your home more energy efficient and to save on your. It's just drafts. I mean, they're a huge sink.
Right.
And when you're like, you know, I was telling Mike I used to live in Arlington and we had really leaky windows, and then we got replacement windows, and it was a revelation. You can feel warm in winter and there's no wind coming through inside. And of course that helped.
And it's quieter.
Bill. And it's quieter. It helped a lot. So there's always something you can do, and there's a lot of, and clearly also there's people working on it all the time, both with the technology and then also the kind of like the corporate kind of stacking dolls that require integration then among who owns this product and this technology and how you work with it.
I'd just like to mention something about windows, because they tend to be sometimes a controversial topic because of historic nature of them. And I agree with you 100% that when we had our windows replaced, all of a sudden you could sit in a chair and not have a wind blowing on you.
Right,
in the
or not
winter.
have to wear 3 sweaters.
It was amazing. The historical folks would like to preserve old windows.
Sure.
And I agree with that, and there are other things one can do with storm windows. There's the window woman locally who restores windows. But the other thing to know is that a lot of our older homes, and I include mine in it, so my home is from 1760, and we replaced the windows, but the windows were not from 1760.
No one wants to live with windows from 1760. No one.
So even 100 years ago, somebody said, I'm tired of this, and they had removed them. So when we upgraded, we kept the sills and the framework, but we installed something. So we kept as much as we could, but still our windows were not historical. And so you need to check it. If you really have first period single pane windows, you may want to look at restoring them, because those are historical artifacts that we would like to keep. But if they've been replaced a couple times, you have more leeway.
The moral of the story is where there's a leak, there's a creative solution if you just look for it and get the information.
Right.
Which is affirming.
And there's our committee, there's the historic preservation folks, you know, so there are a lot of people who can help you if you're not
absolutely
aware.
Yeah. Well, a final question for you. What do you wish people in Newburyport understood better about your committee's work, and how can people support you in it?
Well, I think what they should understand is that they can be members. They can come to our committee meetings. Our committee meetings are open to the public. We meet the last Thursday of every month at City Hall on the second floor in the mayor's conference room. It's a hybrid meeting, so they can join by Zoom if they wish. So there's a link on the city website, so they can participate if they have, and they can participate, or they can just come and ask questions if they have questions about their own homes or something they're trying to do. We are open and available.
Okay, good to know.
Anything?
Yeah, so the other thing is that there's a lot of resources for residents and businesses that are available. We're a great resource for that. The city has some information on its website for the projects and things it's doing. And then, of course, with our Energize Newburyport, we have a lot more resources tied to Mass Save. And what I guess the other thing for residents to understand is that National Grid has its own programs. We work with National Grid on a regular basis because there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades that are going to be happening locally here. And that we're trying to work and make sure that we're sensitive to various communities that, really need some help. In terms of trying to both maintain, lower cost energy, but also get the resources they need to upgrade their residences.
Okay. And I should add that for people who want to visit the website, all you have to do is type Energize Newburyport into your server.
Your browser.
Search,
And
yeah.
it will take
It will get you there.
It'll take you there, and it's easier to remember that.
Yeah.
Energize
Yeah.
Newburyport.
That's how I get there. I can't remember that.
Yeah. Well, Mike, Bill, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. I really appreciate it, and to educate us. And once again, thank you for the aggregate project and everything else that you do. It's really been fun to talk to you. I've learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Likewise,
pleasure.
Mary.
Enjoyed
Thank
talking
you.
with you.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. Till then, be well. Go to the website. Bye, everybody.